Hello and welcome back. Sean here, Mountains Garage, on a beautiful sunny Friday morning, last day of March. Spring is here. It's above freezing. It's going to be in the 40s, I think, today, so I'll take it. Today's subject is one that I'm, for lack of a better term, passionate about since I was in junior high school. I would save my allowance, I believe that was $1 a week, and I would put the money in an envelope and I'd mail it away to all the speed part manufacturers that I saw in the back of Hot Rod or Carcraft magazine, especially the exhaust headers. Hooker, Hedman, Doug Thorley, Blackjack, if you name it, a 70s header company. I had the catalog. I particularly liked the Doug Thorley catalog because he always had, let's say, colorful models on the cover, dressed as cowgirls, I think. So he was definitely cool. You don't even hear of Doug Thorley products anymore. I haven't looked, but I haven't run across them lately. I'll have to look that up. These catalogs were a wealth of information. For me, what else is a teenager gonna do? I didn't play video games. There really wasn't any. I was either outside or studying about my passion for automobiles, even though I had very few outlets. So in the catalogs and whatnot, unbeknownst to me, it wasn't why I bought them, but studying the header catalogs, I learned all the engine families. Now, Chevrolet, small and big block, that's not hard, but Chrysler gets a little more complicated, and Ford, I knew all the engine families and all the displacements, and still do. I've wasted brain space for all these years, and it still pops up every now and then. Sometimes comes in handy when people are trying to interchange stuff, because unlike Chevrolet, who use like one Bellhausen for all the engines, Mopar and Ford, they're all different. I didn't learn that in the header catalogs, but I knew from the engine families and experience what to expect. And I directly correlated this into transmission swapping because I'd studied those catalogs. As my friends and I gradually were able to afford cars, the first kid in my neighborhood lived across the street. His dad got him a 75 Caprice Classic, and the first thing, as soon as he had enough money, we ordered a set of headers and just a set of bolt-on header mufflers. That was usually where things started. You ripped all that stock exhaust system off, or I did one afternoon. I had most of a Craftsman socket set that belonged to my dad, a pretty scary jack arrangement for jacking up a 75 Caprice. But I got it all off and all on in one afternoon, and that night we were out cruising, going deaf, listening to the sounds of that low compression 350. Not impressive, but when you're a kid, you don't know the difference. Or you're learning the difference between a high compression engine and a low compression engine and what they sound like with no exhaust. To this day, when I sit on the houseboat and watch the boats in the channel going past, 5 out of 10 have above the water exhaust on their low compression engine, and it just sits there and blah, 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 blah. It's a sound, but it's kind of like Harley Davidson's. They got a sound, but it's not like an uncorked exhaust on a race mode. So that was my childhood, but what we didn't know, and it probably didn't include in the instructions back then, is this black coating or white, it was one or the other. Now, if you read the fine print, most of the exhaust companies still making headers will tell you that this is just for transport and protecting the part while it's in the package. As soon as you start the engine, this stuff is gone, and now when you buy the mild steel headers, which the painted ones are, that's the most inexpensive option. I suppose we should cover that. You got mild steel, you got coated of some sort, usually ceramic coated. That's still a mild steel header, ceramic coated. And then you have two types of stainless. You got 400 series, which is what all your OEM manufacturers typically use for their exhaust systems. You could MIG weld that. It has a lot of properties of mild steel, but it lasts a really long time. You don't see factory exhaust systems going bad that often anymore, like you used to with the 400 series stainless. And then in 300 series stainless, it sounds backwards, but I'm going in price. The 300 series, you typically either have 304, which is kind of dull looking and can be mistaken for 400 series. And the 309 stuff is usually a little bit shinier. This happens to be Chinese 309, so who knows. The stainless, excuse me, the stainless headers are wonderful. They do probably, are probably more prone to cracking than mild steel from, excessive heat and cooling. But most of your custom exhaust systems these days are made from stainless and going more exotic titanium, but we're not going there. That wasn't certainly the budget for a 16-year-old back then. So it was a ritual. A friend would get a set of headers for the newly purchased car and would all gather around and run on a couple cans of header paint right over the black stuff. And it's basically as soon as you started the engine, you burn most of it off. Even now, the correct way to do it, if you buy a set of mild steel headers that are covered in this black paint, you need to take it to somebody with a wheel abrader, like a big steel shop. You might be successful somewhat sandblasting it, but you got to remove it somehow. And then spray it with actual header paint, which is made for high heat. And then you need to cure it. If you already have a running vehicle, you can start the engine, let it warm up a little, shut it off, and get it warmer every time. If you have a brand new engine and you're trying to break in a camshaft or something, that's not going to happen, and your headers are not going to like it. You're going to burn off your new paint regardless. I have a nephew that built a giant oven out of a 275-gallon heating oil tank, split it in half, and if you filled it with charcoal, it was a process for an afternoon, and lit the charcoal with the headers in there so they warmed up slowly while the charcoal was burning, and he cooked them for 3 or 4 hours. The paint would stay on. It was really functional, and that is the best way if you have to paint mild steel headers. I built many sets of strut front end over the chassis headers. The Hedman Hustler kit was really inexpensive, and you could slap one together on that style frame and front suspension package in a couple hours. As far as mocking it up, welding it, that's a different story. Of course, being mild steel, you could MIG weld it like most of the stuff you buy is. Or if you had the patience or wanted to learn, you could TIG weld it. And back when I did the first few kits, I did not TIG weld them, but they came out pretty well, MIG welding them. Of course, when I'm talking about building headers, I've already ventured off the stuff that's available for your application. And that's fine if you're just doing a vehicle that will accept something like that, but most of the stuff I've done in the last 15 to 20 years, you're making your own from parts. Especially when, like for instance, I'm pointing once again with my orange car, I originally built a set of under chassis headers from a Hedman Header Hustler kit. And that was easy. I ran them just a few passes and decided over that winter I wanted to go fender exit. Had swapped to nitrous, or had to swap to nitrous, and with a nitrous car, as you retard the time and the flames get bigger and bigger, I really didn't want that under my feet. You can, but I didn't want to. So I stuck it out through the fender. Now when you're building a set of headers to exit at a specific point, like a 5-inch hole, that takes a different set of skills, and I built it out of stainless. I learned haphazardly, but I bought a big block Chevy, some thick stainless 2 1/4 inch primary header flanges for the motor. And then I bought a bunch of 2 1/4 stainless elbows, 300 series. And then I bought some 2 3/8 elbows, wanting to build a set of step headers because I'd bought a set of merge collectors. Merge collectors are kind of like this, where they shrink down and then get bigger using, I think, Bertolli principle. I don't know, you'd have to look that up, but if you neck something down and expand it out, it speeds up the flow. That's what somebody learned a long time ago. So using the 2 1/4 and 2 3/8 pipe, one fits inside the other. So if you're building a set of headers, if you have a set built, they charged extra for step headers, but in reality, it's easier because you could slip one inside the other and clock it around and weld it that way, and you're welding a joint like that instead of butting it up, which a lot of header manufacturers or manufacturing you have to do when you're making a set of headers. Typically, you're butting the pipes together. Turbo piping being no different. You're not usually sliding one inside the other and welding it, which is much easier. Back in the catalogs in the 70s, when I was a youth, stainless headers weren't even an option. Even the ceramic coating didn't come along till I was in high school. You pretty much had a set of mild steel headers. Nowadays, the market is flooded with imported stainless headers, and for the most part, they're usable if not repairable. Here's a good example. It has a very thick flange. Whatever process they use for the welding is actually pretty nice. And this is a block hugger header for a small block Chevy, like a hot rod. You know, that's $150, $200. This is a $1,000 header from Hooker Headers. They're still making stuff. They're owned by the Holly Group, I believe. But this has fantastic TIG welding. It's just a superior piece. Each piece is bent without butting stuff together. So this fits a 70 and up F-body Carrera Firebird, or I'm hoping it actually fits when I build the turbo kit on my Race 55. So, but it says right on it, it's 304 stainless, 1 3/4 primary. That's a nice header. I got them in a deal. They're brand new, never been used. Unlikely that I'm going to pay $1,000 for a set of headers. But that doesn't, it might get you enough parts to build your own. When you start buying the flanges and all the bends, and then a collector if you need one, you're gonna spend some money. I buy boxes of bends. I was buying them from Columbia River Manual Bending. I don't know if they're still available. I haven't bought a box of oopsies in a while. They'll sell you for $50 or $100, a giant box shipped to you full of pieces they've cut off. Or you can actually buy the elbows, J-bends, or what's the other one they call it? It goes like this and then it has a kink in it. So you get a couple bends, and then of course you can pie cut if you want to. I'm not much of a pie cutter because that's a lot of welding. And welding the stainless headers comes easy to some, and it's a very difficult skill. My biggest flaw is I usually use too much heat, so I'm actually going to practice one of these days with a lot less heat, and I think that's the answer. As I get older and TIG weld more, I learn from my mistakes, picking up bits and pieces from people that know what they're doing. Building a set of headers out of mild steel, you can use a chop saw, sawzall, hacksaw, bandsaw. The mild steel doesn't take the teeth off the blade. It is easier to work with. The stainless is harder to cut, harder to work with. In the end, I mean, it looks like this forever. You don't have to do anything when you're done. It's gonna turn purple probably, or gold colored with heat, but that's a good look. The mild steel, like my Model A, if you've seen it in the background, I built a set of Lakester style headers that has an LS motor in it, trying to be disguised as something else. And now that I've got the headers all built, I put mufflers in them and turnouts. I'm still stuck with what to do. I can't let them just rust in place. Paint's a pain. I could have them powder coated, which may be what I do. Cerakote, I guess is a good option. My buddy used to do that, so I have to do something with them. Now that I'm done building them, and it took me a while, not actual work, just over time. It took me a while to actually finish that project, and there they sit, raw, waiting to be coated. If I built them out of stainless, while harder to do, I'd be done by now. That part of the project. That's it. That's my ramblings on tubular exhaust headers. It's a great upgrade over the manifolds or the factory. It sometimes, my buddy calls them header folds. They make factory manifolds that kind of look like a set of headers, but still all merge into one. Turbo LS stuff, it seems like the factory exhaust manifolds will get you well into the 7-second quarter-mile range if you want to run those, and they're a lot easier to work with. And they're cast steel, not cast iron, so you can actually weld them up and do whatever you want with them. So I've used those a lot, flipped upside down or run in the normal direction. They work pretty well. As far as LS swapping in any GM or anything else, the later model Silverado header, it's a little short one, 3/4 length, kind of looks like this, but it's got a collector way up here. I find that fits almost any chassis. It hugs the block so nicely, misses the transmission, and that's a really inexpensive set of headers in stainless, aftermarket, imported. But a good deal when you swap them stuff. So, and they'll fit forward or backwards, upside down, doesn't matter. So that's it. Have a great day. Talk to you soon.